Hello art friends, welcome to a new video. Today I'm practicing something I've never been good at, and that is drawing people. I'm going to try a few different pens, but mostly I'm going to use fountain pens and watercolor. I was really struggling to get things right in this video, and most of the drawing didn't come out very strong, but I still want to show you the process because this is how I realistically learn something that I'm not that comfortable with. And I want to take the chance to share a few tips about drawing people and also talk a bit about productivity and motivation. If you want to hang out, draw along, go grab your materials, your snacks and drinks. Let's get started. I'm starting with a frixion pen with erasable ink. It's a safe way to start if ink feels too scary for you. This pen comes in a lot of different colors. I think it's the heat from the friction that makes the ink disappear. It's also super convenient for rubbing off masking fluid, so I keep this pen around my desk, but I don't find it to be that fun to draw with compared to a fountain pen. The first fountain pen I'm gonna try is, I think it's called Ohto tasche, and I'm using kaweco's brown ink. It's fun to try this pen every once in a while because it's very short. I can hold it in a very different way, but this ink is not waterproof, so I don't use it very often. I also tried a ballpoint pen. It's not bad, it's just not my favorite. It's just a texture thing, so feel free to try a few different materials. It's important, especially if you're gonna sketch outside, the pen should feel very comfortable, like an extension of your hand. Drawing figures like this is not a new subject to me, but I never learned or practiced intensively. I think maybe it's not my favorite thing to draw. It's just a bit different compared to portraits, maybe a little less engaging for me, but my goal is to capture people's personality through what they're wearing, what they're carrying, and their mannerisms. To get a good gesture, it's really helpful to imagine how is this person's weight distributed. Think about if they're carrying any heavy bags, which leg is supporting most of their weight, or if someone is leaning onto something, try to imagine how it feels to stand like them. And also, the human head is a very heavy part of the body. If you draw a straight line vertical down the head, compare that spot to the feet so that you can ground this person. You might be surprised by how unbalanced some poses look like, but I think that's also how to make a pose look dynamic. I also find that if someone's silhouette is very readable, if their limbs are sticking out of their torso in some way, it's gonna be easier to draw a clearer pose, because it won't turn out to be a lump or a blob. One of the viewers, CCCC, says, I often find that I don't have the time to capture something quickly when observing people outside. I think this requires a bit of a different approach. Many beginners like myself, we use that drawing with the right side of the brain technique, where we draw exactly what we see, not what we think we see. Like those one-line drawings that are heavily relying on observation. This doesn't really help with drawing people or animals live. My first tip is to find a way to train your memory and imagination. Most people who are new to drawing don't have the need to look at a shape and memorize it just for a few seconds until you can put it down on paper. I noticed that I couldn't do it because I was heavily dependent on still images as reference. So it's very helpful if you can start to work on the memory. You can start with very simple objects. Are you able to take a glimpse at someone's hat and put it down on paper? Or maybe their backpack? Can you look at that for just 1 or 2 seconds and hold that memory as you draw them? Another thing I found really helpful is imagination. If the person you're drawing suddenly changed position or left or got blocked by something else, how you finish that drawing is up to you. If you have been drawing for a while, you'll find that your brain almost search the visual library and look for possible poses to finish the rest of the drawing. And even if you haven't built that visual library yet, you can still try out to put down a few strokes to test out and see, does it make sense if I place this person's arm here? Does it make sense if I bend one of their legs a little bit more? The finished drawing usually don't look that nice because they're partially made up, maybe a little stiff, or maybe it looks like they're gonna fall or something. But it's still a great workout for your imagining part of the brain. Think of it like a search engine. The more you build your memory database, the more you search in there, the easier and faster you will become at drawing. And over time, it will make your drawing look more confident. I also find that speed makes my drawing look more confident. Holding the pen very lightly also helps to give that effortless feeling. For me, I think the more I want a drawing to look correct, the more careful and timid the result will get. So I like to trick myself by saying I'm gonna make an inaccurate drawing of this person, and that loosens up my hand, my arm, and usually I prefer the result this way. A bonus benefit I found from drawing people live is that I suddenly found drawing people from photo reference a lot easier. They're never gonna move, so I have plenty of time to make the right marks, while also having the feeling like I have dealt with more difficult situations than this before, so this cannot scare me. And about how to color outside quickly, I'm afraid I don't have a good answer yet. I'm also trying to find a way that is more efficient and doesn't take a whole lot of effort. Maybe next week I'm gonna try bring a water pen with me to see if it helps. Another person, Brooke2478, this person asked if I can make a video about work ethics. So I thought it would be fun to share a bit of my story. I will try my best to make it not sound like trauma dumping, because the point is to help others, not really about me and my past. So I grew up in the 90s in Beijing, and I went to a private boarding school. It wasn't like a fancy kind of school, it was more like a military style of crowd management. It was a little bit like a prison. The food was great, but the schedule were insane. We got up every day at 6, make our beds and get ready for jogging, and everything was very, very strict, because if we didn't follow the orders, the teacher will get a deduction in their salary, and it was made very clear to us. We often get punishment because the teacher also get punishments. I know that was a terrible system, so I had to spend hours every day doing things I didn't care, like calligraphy practice. And that's on top of math homeworks and piano practices. We were not allowed to have snacks or phones. There were also no privacy either. You're always watched by teachers or classmates. As an introvert, you can probably imagine how terrible it felt for me. So all of this to say, I grew up in this environment that is very similar to dopamine fasting, but it was not done in a wholesome way. For example, reading a novel used to be a reward if I can manage to finish all my homework before bedtime. My favorite book was Jane Eyre because she also lived in a horrible school. I used to comfort myself by thinking that at least the kids in my school weren't starving or dying. So compared to my schedule now, I think I can say that I feel extremely privileged to have free time to do things I like. Every day I have at least a few hours I can do whatever I choose. I mean, of course, I can tolerate doing things I don't like sometimes. We all have obligations and need to pay the bills. But at least it's not 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, like how it was in my school. I wouldn't say I'm grateful for what happened to me in the school, because I can't recommend that life to anyone. But I also don't want to complain too much. I've never experienced true hardships like war or abusive people or financial medical difficulties. It does help me to put things into perspective, to realize how precious it is to have free time, and I should not take that for granted. Some of you might think I'm quite disciplined, but I actually don't practice self-control very much. If I have cake or ice cream at home, I'm very likely to eat them up within just a day or two. I feel like having the freedom to choose what I do is what I was denied as a child, so I kind of overcompensate sometimes. And I paint quite often for the same reason, because I consider it to be a fun treat. It's like sometimes when I feel bored, deep down I know I'm looking for something challenging. Kind of like some people like to play video games on hard mode. So if I'm looking for something challenging, I will go outside my comfort zone and learn something that I've been putting off. But if I feel like I need more calm and relaxation, maybe put on a movie and explore some color mixes. I find it to be more satisfying overall, and I don't think I ever regretted drawing or painting. I also cannot draw for more than 4 hours a day. I know some people in the concept art industry, they can draw up to 6 to 8 hours a day. I don't think my brain has that kind of endurance to enjoy doing something for that long. And it's not good for my arm and my body either. I want it to be something that I crave to come back to the next day, something I miss if I skip a day or two. I also try to be mindful about how I spend my time, the information I'm consuming, and how does it influence my mood, especially with scrolling through social media. It's very much like potato chips. It's a bite-sized dopamine fix. It's so hard to resist, and once it starts, it's so hard to stop. It can quickly turn into a very bad feedback loop. You blame yourself for being lazy, and you get sad, and then you get even less energy. I actually struggled for a long time because my family, my teachers, they always called me lazy because I'm a very slow-paced person. I don't like to rush things, and I like to relax. My mom always likes to remind me when I was playing. She always says, "Isn't it time for you to do something productive?" And I kept hearing this voice years after I left home, and I've just felt really guilty for wanting to have fun and relax because I feel like I'm not producing anything. And it took me a really long time to learn to answer that voice in my head and say, it's time for me to rest. It's time for me to have some fun because I am just a mortal human being. I need to have these things to keep my sanity. By the way, I found that John Singer Sargent, he had painted a lot of people being lazy together, just relaxing in nature, basking in sunlight. I feel like he must be someone who appreciates these things. He gets it for sure. We used to have a specific type of teachers in school that they would sometimes physically rip people's homework into pieces if they were not happy with what they saw. I don't know if you guys have had this kind of teachers before, but it was quite common. It's like asserting dominance kind of behavior. Somehow one of the teachers, he became the character of my negative self-talk. But because how little I value his opinion, I almost never take what he says to heart. It has a comical effect, like watching a full-grown man throwing a temper tantrum because I didn't do a good job. It's just so ridiculous. And that works to my advantage when I hear my negative self-talk comes out of this unintelligent, bad-mannered person. And that always helps me to set a barrier between me and that negative opinion. And I also like to pretend that, since I've been drawing for almost 4 years, I pretend that I have an art child who is a 4-year-old. She lives inside of me, and it's my job to protect her, defend her, and make sure she has what she needs to thrive. To dampen the fear of the blank page, I like to first think about what is my worst fear anyway. I think like most people, I'm really afraid of losing a loved one to an accident or going to jail or becoming financially ruined. Compared to those things, the blank page is quite small and mundane. This might be a weird gratification practice because it always reminds me to be grateful. I am healthy enough to spend time drawing today. I can afford to buy materials for drawing. I hope this doesn't sound too annoying. I'm sorry if it does. Sometimes I also roll my eyes to these overly grateful attitudes. But I think for some artists, it feels like the worst thing that could happen with a blank page is that after they spend some time on it, nobody on the internet is gonna like it. And somehow that would ruin the way they see their art, their process, all the effort they put in, and they just feel like a failure. And that's just simply not true. You're gaining so much knowledge and experience. The internet has nothing to do with your growth. And the internet is not a reliable source of affirmation because it's not fair. The algorithm is not fair, and it would be such a shame if you let that ruin your artistic growth. So just remember that you can always get another piece of paper, and you don't have to post anything online if you don't feel like it. Personally, I think you should be the main source of affirmation because nobody knows your growth, your struggles better than yourself. So it's more meaningful when that affirmation comes from you. And over time, that will direct you to your unique style. It's a balance between affirmation and constructive criticism. You should absolutely not bash yourself or be rude when you critique your own work. And when you give yourself affirmation, it's fine to be emotional and really cherish and admire your improvement. Just like raising a child, it's all about celebrating and accumulating baby steps, small successes. And that joy will motivate you to come back for more. Or at least that's how motivation works for me. And I think that's all I wanted to say for today. I am getting a bit tired of drawing people now, so I will probably draw something else in the next one. And I'm looking forward to see you there. Goodbye.